Hello and thank you for tuning in. This is Jim with Upper Tampa Bay Paddle Sports. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Three Brothers board CC, and we're going to be mounting lashing points or cargo straps to be able to attach all the cargo that we carry when we paddle. Some of the larger boards like the Jason Ryan or the Double Up come with lashing points on the board. Some of the smaller boards, due to how they're going to be used for surfing and such forth, do not necessarily come with the lashing straps, but there's something simple that we can add. So we're going to go ahead and cover this today, cover some of the mounting options, so stay tuned. So one of the first things that we're going to take a look at here is the actual attachment point itself. These are the tri-way lash mates from Seattle Sports. There's a number of different ones on the market. We've used these in the past. They work quite well, but again, they're not the only ones out there. One of the first things that we're going to look at is the board itself. As you can see, this is the beautiful new CC from Three Brothers Boards, an absolutely gorgeous wood grain board. Typically, you would see your attachment points across the nose of the board. And the purpose for that is it's somewhere that you can put your PFD when you paddle, and possibly a cooler. These are the things that we typically would expect to have with us while we're paddling. Although this is typical, we're going to look at a number of different mounting points. Although this is obviously where we see it done most often, there's a couple of things to take in consideration. Number one, on a board that's as attractive as this one, you tend to clutter up the area that you want to see the most. The other thing is that depending on the size cooler that you're bringing with you, you can create a lot of weight on the nose of the board, which can impact the way that it handles. So although that would be the typical way that you would normally see it done, one of the other ways that we have found that has worked well in the past is to attach right at the front of the deck pad. This keeps the cargo close enough to be used while still keeping it out of your way. One of the other ways that we've attached it in the past is by moving to the rear of the board and keeping it completely out of your way by attaching in the last third of the board. So we'll look at the different options, the pros and cons of doing so. Looking at the option of having the attachment point across the rear of the board, one of the advantages is that you can keep your cargo here back and out of your way, helping to offset any load that you may be carrying on the front. The disadvantage to doing this is if you're going to surf your board, you have a tendency to walk rearward, and you would not necessarily want anything back here. Let's move up towards the front of the board and take a look at mounting at the front of the mat. So with the attachment points right up at the front of the mat, you can see that we have the ability to tie cargo down here, tie the cooler down. It's in close proximity to the handle, which would be where you would typically be standing. So it's easy access to this, and it keeps the weight off the front of the board. For surfing, you wouldn't typically have a PFD up here while you're surfing, but the strap would be here. Now the strap is removable. It's something that you can untie and get out of your way. The one thing to keep in mind is that these lashing points will still remain there. So it's something that you want to understand. You know, you could potentially be falling off the board while surfing, so just keep that in mind. That would be a case for putting them up at the front of the board if you're going to surf the board a lot. If you flat water paddle, this is the area that you would want to consider mounting. All right, before we get started, let's look at a couple of the things that we're going to need for doing this. First off, we'll need the latching points, the kit itself, which includes the bungee and the lashing points. We'll need a small bit of sandpaper and a little bit of glue, preferably some sort of super glue. Some of the kits, like the Easy Plugs, they do come with glue. This particular kit comes with a double-backed adhesive, which we're going to go ahead and remove. We're just going to scuff up the back of this attachment point, and we're going to use the glue to make it a more permanent mount. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to want to mount we're going to mark two even points on the board, and we're going to just lightly scuff the surface of the epoxy up so that the glue has a better chance of adhering. So let's get started. As I mentioned, these mounts do have a double-backed 3M adhesive on it, which is pretty good in most cases. We tend to be in the water quite a bit, so when we attach these, we want them to stay on. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove this 3M adhesive. We've got an X-Acto knife. We're just going to lightly run this around the outside of the adhesive. being very careful not to slip, not to hit our finger, and not to cut the mount itself. We're just going to gently pry that off so that we can get to the back side of this and we can scuff it up with some sandpaper. So let's go ahead and do that. So now that we've removed the adhesive, we have it nice and clean. There's a smooth surface here. We want to go ahead and lightly scuff that up with some sandpaper so that the glue has a better chance of adhering. Once we get that nice and rough, we're going to go ahead and mark our points on the board and we'll get those attached. Okay, now that we have selected our lashing points, we're just going to go ahead and take a Sharpie marker and just going to gently mark the area to scuff. And we're going to go ahead and do that on both sides. We're going to take a little bit of sandpaper here, and strictly within the area that we've marked, we're going to go ahead and rough up the epoxy just a little bit. And I know it hurts to do this to a beautiful board like this, but it's something that we need in order for it to fasten. You just want to make sure that when you do this, you don't go outside of the area that you'll be attaching. You want to go ahead and get it roughed up a little bit. A board like this is usually polished to a beautiful, smooth, shiny surface. And from a cosmetic standpoint, that's great, but for attaching anything, we do need to get a little bit of grit for it to bite onto. So we're going to go ahead and just rough this up. We want to make sure we don't go all the way through the epoxy naturally. So just basically like this, just rough it up a little bit in approximately the same shape as what we're going to be attaching. And again, be careful not to go outside of the area of the attachment point. But from there, we'll go ahead and we'll mount this on. Okay, now that we've roughed up both sides of the board, we're going to go ahead. We're going to proceed to the next step, which is attaching the lashing point to the board. You see, I've got some super glue here. This is a Gorilla Glue. It's a waterproof glue that we've used successfully in the past. There's a number of different glues on the market. We're going to go ahead. We're going to put a little bead of this on the back of our lashing point. We want to stay within the confines of the lashing point here. We don't want any oozing out the sides. You know, if it's sticking out the side on the board, it's going to be something that's unattractive. You see I have a roll of tape here. So once we go ahead and affix this, we don't want it sliding off the side of the board. So we're going to go ahead and tape it in place while the glue sets. So let's press this firmly in place. We're going to go ahead and we'll take our tape. And we're going to just tape this in place for a few hours while we let the glue set up. I've done this previously, come back and I've had them slide off on the floor. The surface of these boards, like I say, it's polished to a furniture-like finish, which will just, especially when you add the glue, it acts as a lubricant and it'll just slide right off. So I do recommend taping these in place. Follow the guidelines on your glue. Usually a few hours is adequate. Some of them ask for overnight. This one's fairly quick. I'll let it sit here for maybe 3 or 4 hours, and then I'll go ahead and take the tape off and we'll put the attachment point. So we have both of the attachment points cemented to the board. Again, we're going to let this sit for 3 or 4 hours, let the cement set up really good. Once it's done, we'll go ahead and we'll spring the bungee between the two. We want to keep it taut, but not necessarily too tight. We want to have the ability to lift up on a little bit to get the cargo underneath. Once that's done, the board will be ready to use. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and you've learned a little bit today. Keep your paddles wet. We'll see you next time.